right. Welcome to our show. All the good ones
are taken, aka at Goat.
I'm Megan.
And I'm Alex.
And this is our podcast. All right, Alex, how was your week?
It was good. It's been a long week, but I was working. The fall semester just started, so it's been a little crazy, like kids coming in and out. But it's been good. I feel like the apartment has finally settled in.
Yes.
So, I mean, there's still settling that needs to be done, but I feel better about it now.
Good.
So, how was your week?
Good. So we had our celebratory party last week for the release of our podcast.
Yay!
So that was really fun having our friends and family over.
Yes, thank you to everyone who came. It was so much fun.
It was very fun, and I'm really proud of everything that we've done with this podcast, and so thankful to all of our friends and family who have supported us, whether they were at our party or not. So big thank you to everyone. We love you, and keep listening, please.
We love you all so much. We're just getting started, truly, but even the people who just give it a listen, or our friends who design the art, or Shelby doing all the background stuff. Truly, I feel like we've come so far already, and this is only our 5th episode plus the minisode. So
I know I've been listening back to the first episode, and I'm like, wow, we've come literally so far.
It sounds so different, which is crazy because it's only been 2 months since we started recording officially. Yeah. So wild. Very proud of us.
You know, keep sending us your suggestions, your recommendations, your good feedback, your
constructive criticisms.
Yep. But also yesterday I was at a family event and I played pickleball for the first time.
That looked fun.
It was very fun. I do have to say, I was like, Shelby, we need to make a peas league immediately.
You know, I've been asked to play pickleball before, and I don't know what my hesitation is, but I've always been I'm not gonna do this.
It's like a version, it's a mix up between tennis and volleyball.
Okay, it looks like a great time.
It's very fun.
Maybe we'll play.
I recommend.
Only if y'all come rock climbing with us. I will. Correct. Megan, you're gonna come rock climbing. Eventually.
And then lastly, at work we have a women's employee resource group.
Cool.
And they had a series, not even a series, just a presentation of being bold. And so they had 3 different women in the organization talk about what it means to be bold and their experience as women in the business world. And it was really beautiful, and that on top of this book has kind of inspired me to get back into writing again. So it's been very almost cathartic being encouraged through this book and women in my organization. So
yay.
Woohoo.
I'm
Go
glad.
women.
It's tough when you get into that slump, and it's honestly hard to come out of it. But, any sort of progress is great progress. Yeah. So proud of you.
Well, Alex, do you want to take us away on a little sneak peek of our book today?
Yes, I shall. One hot afternoon during the era in which you've gotten yourself ridiculously tangled up with heroin, you will be riding the bus and thinking what a worthless piece of crap you are, when a little girl will get on the bus holding the strings of 2 purple balloons. She'll offer you one of the balloons, but you won't take it because you believe you no longer have the right to such tiny, beautiful things. You're wrong. You do. And this week's book is Tiny Beautiful Things by Cheryl Strayed.
All right, so our 1-sentence synopsis for this book is: an accomplished writer from a hard background becomes the advice columnist for a online magazine. ChatGPT brings out its magic and rewords it to say, a resilient author emerging from a challenging background assumes the role of an advice columnist for an online magazine. So not much different, but also gravely different.
A little sparkly.
A little sparkly.
A little sparkly.
Like the sparkle emojis.
Sparkle, sparkle. Yeah.
And this is the Goodreads 1-sentence synopsis. an anniversary edition of the best-selling collection of Dear Sugar advice columns written by the author of #1 New York Times bestseller Wild, featuring a new preface and 6 additional columns, soon to be a Hulu original series.
Okay. And this is the official summary. So, for more than a decade, thousands of people have sought advice from Dear Sugar, the pseudonym of best-selling author Cheryl Strayed, first through her online column at The Rumpus, later through her hit podcast Dear Sugars, and now through her popular Substack newsletter Tiny Beautiful Things. Collects the best of Dear Sugar in one volume, bringing her wisdom to many more readers. This 10th anniversary edition features 6 new columns and a new preface by Strayed. Rich with humor, insight, compassion, and absolute honesty, this book is a balm for everything life throws our way. And I'm actually going to read the preface that Strayed herself wrote. This is for the 10th anniversary edition, aka 2022. And Strayed goes on to say, I've long believed literature's greatest superpower is how it makes us feel less alone. Across generations, cultures, classes, races, genders, and every other divide, stories and sentences can make us think, oh yes, me too. That is precisely how it feels to love and to lose and to triumph and try again. The only thing I ever hope to do as a writer is to make people feel less alone, to make them feel more human, to make them feel what I have felt so many times as a reader. Stories have the power to save us by illuminating the most profoundly beautiful and terrible things about our existence. That I've had the opportunity to do so very directly in my work as Dear Sugar was a lucky surprise. When I took on the unpaid gig of writing the column anonymously for The Rumpus in early 2010, I'd recently completed the first draft of my second book, Wild. I said yes to writing the Dear Sugar column because I thought it would be fun. It didn't take long to see that I'd be wrong. It was fun, but also so much more than that. This work began as a lark, quickly took on real meaning. It became something I gave everything to. And eventually it also became a book, which over this past decade has inspired a podcast, a play, and a television show, as well as the expanded 10th anniversary edition that includes 6 new columns. All along the way, I've never forgotten that none of it would have been possible without all the people who wrote to me. In an age where there is much discussion about the disconnection that comes from the internet, the pandemic, the fallout of too much life lived on screens, Dear Sugar has always been quite simply about one person writing a letter to another. In pain and courage and confusion and clarity. In love and fear and faith. Dear Sugar has always been about connecting. It has always been about believing that when we dare to tell the truth about who we are and what we want and how exactly we're afraid or sad or lost or uncertain, that transformation is possible. That light can be found, that courage and compassion can be mustered. To be a part of that has been among the greatest privileges of my life. Cheryl Strayed, November 2022. I just thought it was necessary to read that because it really just set up the book so well, and it really outlines Strayed's goal of like why she even went into Dear Sugar, why she wrote this book and like compiled these essays, and I thought it was so profound and so good. So yeah. There we go.
Thank you, Alex. That was great. So a little bit more about the book. It has 4.21 stars on Goodreads. It was published originally on July 10th, 2012, and it was a nominee for Goodreads Best Fiction of 2012. It was re-released for its 10th anniversary, I guess, in November of 2022, and it was also a Reese Witherspoon's book club pick, as you can tell by the little... It's now a Hulu original series, which I actually recently just started watching since I finished this, and it is very good, and I do recommend. If you aren't the type of person who likes a collection of columns, or if you're just looking for a new drama, it's great.
And I will be definitely checking it out later.
So a little bit more about Cheryl Strayed. She is a white American woman and author of 4 books, Tiny Beautiful Things, Torch, Brave Enough, and the #1 New York Times bestseller, Wild. She's also the author of the popular Dear Sugar letters, currently on Substack, and the host of 2 hit podcasts, Sugar Calling and Dear Sugars. There are several trigger warnings that you should be aware of if you are interested in reading this book. Among them are sexual assault, miscarriages, suicide, drugs, death, and a whole lot of other traumas. So just make sure that you read that and are in a good headspace.
And
before
are
reading.
prepared.
Yep.
For sure.
And as always, you can always, skip over one column if you're not feeling it.
Yeah, you absolutely don't have to read every single one. But there are many broad topics within this book. So.
I mean, the whole point is that someone's reaching out because they're in a pickle and asking for advice. So
they're maybe looking for just someone to hear them out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Alex, what did you think?
So I actually loved this book. It was definitely a tough read because it is nonfiction, as we discussed. And it is just, or not just, but it is a collection of columns and essays from Strayed and her audience. It's not a book that I would recommend, like, you sit down and read all in one go. Mm-mm. No, if I was to recommend this book to others, like, I would definitely say that you need to take your time with it and you need to, like, read it in chunks because it is so content heavy, not in a bad way. I'm just saying there's a lot of, like, themes and discussions about certain topics that it's like you really want to take your time and kind of marinate on it and think about it. You don't want to, like, rush through it. And some of it was triggering, like, absolutely. So I kind of was, I definitely procrastinated this book in general, but it took me a little longer to, like, get through it because I was like, ugh, the emotions, the feelings, the human experience. Like, I was just like, oh my God. But I loved it and I do recommend. So
yeah, it was a tough read at times. And then at other times I was like, I don't understand this one.
Yeah.
It's definitely a wide variety of topics that are covered, as we already said. And so not everything's going to resonate with you, but it was cool. I mean, I'm glad that I read it. I typically don't read things like this. If I do, it's like a fictional short story situation. Right. So this is something a little bit outside of my comfort zone. So I'm really glad, Alex, that you recommended it.
Yay. I'm glad we read it. It was tough read. It's going to be tough to cover it.
Yeah.
But proud of us.
I think also my issue with something like this is that it makes you sometimes feel inadequate.
Yeah. Like you're not doing enough.
Right. And you hear all of this, like, profound advice from someone who, like, seems like she has her shit together, even though she says multiple times that, like, she doesn't. Don't.
Yeah.
But when you write so well, it's like, how can you not? Like,
I thought about it in a way that's like, when a friend comes to you for advice, you in the moment, like, just do your best to give them the best advice that you can. Mm-hmm. A lot of times, like, when I'm giving my friends advice, it's not something necessarily that I even am implementing in my own life. Although I should probably, like, if I'm dishing out that advice, like, you would hope that I'm also taking my own advice. Sometimes that's just not the fucking case, and that's okay. And, like, I think we also have to think about, like, a lot of these essays, they started in, like, what, 2010? Mm-hmm. Like, times are different. Yeah. I'm not saying that times are so vastly different now that we can't relate to these experiences or, like, things like that. I'm trying to say that there are factors in our life currently, inside and out of it, that affect, like, what we can exert in this life and how well, I'm doing air quotes because that's not really, well is not, should be generalized term. Like, you should just, if you're existing, you're making it work.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
I'll just leave it on that.
Throughout this book, there's a lot of, like, strong, poetic, relatable writing. I think she does a very good job, and I'm really glad. I mean, that's why she was chosen for this, is because she is a fantastic writer.
It was wonderful. Her writing was amazing.
Yeah. And I think, honestly, this book did change my view on a lot of things. I think how I view friendship has changed by reading this.
Yeah.
And we'll take that into my personal relationships going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's good to hear these other experiences, and when I think about it, because, like, it's like, okay, I'm not alone in these feelings. Like, there are others who feel the same.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit, like, comforting to know that.
Yeah. So this book starts off with an introduction from Steve Almond, who was the original Dear Sugar. for his friend's online magazine, The Rumpus. After a year, he quits, but he finds Cheryl as his replacement. And here are some quotes just from his introduction that I think explain why Cheryl is the one that is chosen for this. Inexplicable sorrows await all of us. That was her essential point. Second quote. She understands that attention is the first and final act of love, and that the ultimate dwindling resource in the human arrangement isn't cheap oil or potable water or even common sense, but mercy. Third quote. She offers what we wish every mother would, enough compassion to make us feel safe within our broken need, and enough wisdom to hold on to hope.
Damn.
I know.
He didn't have to throw the mother one in.
I know. And this is like the first 7 pages of this book.
Oh my God.
Like,
that's the thing. Like, because I started with obviously, like, I read the preface and introduction of every book. And once I read the preface and introduction of this book, I like put it down for a couple of days because I was like, oh my God. Like, I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get through this one. Just because it's so emotionally heavy. Not because of any other reason.
Yeah. And just for the sake of the podcast and brevity, our episode, The Happy Place, was pretty short. So we're hoping to make this kind of a exclusive 2-hitter week of 2 podcasts. So we're just
congratulations.
We're just going to talk about a couple different stories throughout all of the parts. So she breaks it up into 5 different parts with an additional 6th part for the re-release in 2022.
And we will read the little notes that she makes of each part. This one is kind of hard because unlike our other fictional books, we don't really go off of like chronological story. It's more of just like section, and we don't want to read the sections to y'all. So Meagan broke it up really well. Like, we just kind of selected the few that we like or spoke to us.
Yeah.
And we'll touch on those.
Yeah. So this is for part 1, which is called It Was Always Only Us.
And essentially each part, there's a question and then there's Strayed response. So I'll read the question and then her response. So the first question is, what is this book? And Strayed says, it's a selection of Dear Sugar columns. Many were originally published on therumpus.net. Others appear here for the first time. The letters in this book were emailed to Sugar via an anonymous form on the Rumpus or mailed directly to Sugar's email address. Most people who sent me letters didn't know I was Cheryl Strayed, and likewise most of the letter writers were entirely anonymous to me. This book is a collection of intimate exchanges between strangers. Did you change the letters before publishing them? In some cases, I lightly edited the letters for length and/or clarity, but most appear exactly as they were written by the people who felt moved to write to me. What sort of letters do you answer? All sorts. Some are about romance and love, others are about grief and loss, and others still about money or family troubles. My criteria for selecting letters to answer in the Dear Sugar column are highly subjective. I'll answer to anything so long as it intersects or challenges or touches me. What sort of advice do you give? The best I can think of.
I highlighted that. I thought that was really beautiful.
Yeah, like the best I can think of. Just, yeah. She's very modest. She states multiple times, like, she's not a therapist. Like, she is not a professional in any capacity other than a writer, of course, and an author. But, like, and I think that's the purest form of advice giving and just being present for another person. Like, here I am at my best, being there for you, period. Yeah.
So the first one that we have selected is called How to Get Unstuck. And this one spoke to me as, I think it's the second one in the book, but it's about a couple who gets pregnant and they weren't expecting it, but were surprised that they wanted to keep it and unfortunately lost it. And it has been about, I think, 9 months since the miscarriage, and she's still devastated and depressed, and just everyone's telling her to get over it, and she can't. She lost her baby.
Which is something you're absolutely not supposed to say to someone who has just had a miscarriage.
No, absolutely not. Mm-mm. And she has every right to be sad and depressed and etc. because of this. But everyone in her life, including her husband, it seems, are just like going on as if it didn't happen. At least that's how she feels.
Right.
And what I loved so much about Sugar's response is that she just, from the get-go, says, I'm so sorry that your baby girl died. And I really liked how she didn't go into advice right away. She allowed, and throughout all of her responses, does such a good job of acknowledging the pain, you know, the trauma of, you know, whatever is causing that pain.
Yeah. To give it space to be there.
Yeah.
Which is really important.
And that was one of 2 or 3 pink tabs I had. I started crying when I read I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
But another thing that I liked that Cheryl/Sugar said was, so the girl who wrote the letter feels that she is on a different planet from everyone else, and essentially Sugar is like, you are, like, you, everyone else is on planet Earth and you're on planet my baby girl just died. And she says, many of those people love you and are worthy of your love, but they are not the people who will be helpful to you when it comes to healing the pain of your daughter's death.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's true. Like, anytime someone faces grief, like, they're in a world of their own.
Yeah.
No one can really be in that space with them because they themselves have not experienced it.
And
they can be surrounding it. Absolutely.
And even when you have, like, you don't have the same experiences.
No.
Or relationship with the thing, the person that died.
So to say something is so dismissive as like, okay, well, you just need to get over it, or it's been enough time now.
Yeah. Mm-mm. And of course, I don't think the people in her life are meaning to be dismissive of it. They're trying to help her, I think, but
in their own way.
Yeah.
But it's not the help that she needs.
No.
Right.
So Sugar then goes on to say, this is how you get unstuck. You reach. Not so you can walk away from the daughter you loved, but so you can live the life that is yours. The one that includes the sad loss of your daughter, but is not arrested by it. The one that eventually leads you to a place in which you not only grieve her, but also feel lucky to have had the privilege of loving her.
Yep. Yep.
And I think that's ultimately what grief comes down to, is it fucking sucks, but it sucks because it mattered, like, that it mattered to you. You had something worth losing.
Yeah. It's all the love that you have left to give.
Yeah.
To that thing. And I'm quoting something. I don't know what it is, but that is a quote. And I think it's facts.
Yeah. And she goes on to talk about how she was a youth advocate for these middle schooler girls who were at risk, who had families from, like, lower class. And they were, like, put into this program of just at-risk girls. And a lot of them were in families that had drug addiction and rotation of men always at their house. And, you know, she would call CPS, she felt like, on a daily basis, but to no avail, because some terrible statistic of essentially them not mattering enough. But years later, she ends up going to a Taco Bell and seeing one of her students from that program there working full-time as one of the Taco Bell employees. And she comes up to Sugar and says, I never forgot you, even after all these years. And Sugar says, I'm so proud of you, I said, squeezing her shoulder. And the girl says, I made it, didn't I? And I cried.
Yeah.
And Sugar says, you did. You absolutely did. I never forgot her either.
It's just so... like, to be there for those girls and, like, to just have the bare minimum hope that, like, they'll get out of middle school, that they'll, like, survive, essentially. And then to see this girl, this young woman later in life, and, like, for her to be so proud of herself and say, like, I did it, like, I made it, like, so
and
touching.
Especially also for us, you know, as college graduates, we wouldn't say, like, working at Taco Bell is making it. You know, it would almost be like an insult to us if we were working at Taco Bell. And I think it's, I mean, that's all privilege talking, of course, but it's also so beautiful that your version of making it is so high if you think it has to be money or success. Like, those things can all be achieved at any job, at any level of existence. So everyone get off your high horse.
Well, and like Meagan said, like, we are coming from a place of privilege, right? Like, we're white females. Like, we are females, but we're white females. We had vastly different circumstances than what Strayed described these young women were dealing with. And although, yes, we've gone through struggles and like our own traumas and things like that, our lives were not parallel to these young women. And to have the hope that they have, to have the like tenacity to like keep going is just so impressive to me. And like, I honestly don't know that I could say like I would have done the same, you know, like continue to like persevere. I just, it's unfathomable to me. And like, these were just their everyday lives. Like they were still going to school when they did. They were still like going day to day, and they all while this incredibly heinous shit was like happening in the background.
Yeah.
So just wow. Just wow.
The next one that I chose for part 1 is called Write Like a Motherfucker. Essentially, it's this woman writing who feels like she should be better. And there's a couple throughout here that are writers writing in to say, like, I don't understand why I'm not getting these book deals or whatever else writers do. But what I quoted from her, even just her question alone, is, I am sick with panic that I cannot, will not override my limitations, insecurities, jealousies, and ineptitude to write well with intelligence and heart and lengthiness. And I fear that even if I do manage to write, that the stories I do write will be disregarded and mocked. How does a woman get up and become the writer she wishes to be? And Sugar goes on to say, but I'd finally reached a point where the prospect of not writing a book was more awful than the one of writing a book that sucked.
Yep. And that's so important about the creative process in general. Like, it's worse to not create anything than to sit there and be like, well, what if what I create is terrible?
Yeah.
You know, like, you just have to do it. And like, you will feel so much more fulfillment for just going ahead and taking that step, regardless if it's good and bad, because as we know, good and bad are so subjective. You just have to do it because you're betraying yourself. You're betraying the creative process by not doing it.
And she goes on to explain, you know, why do you think you should be one of these famous authors?
Right.
And essentially says, it was only when I gave up these notions, when I humbly surrendered, that I was able to do the work I needed to do. So sometimes you just gotta stop getting in your own damn way.
Yeah. I mean, just do it. Just do it.
Yeah, she says, the most fascinating thing to me about your letter is that buried beneath all the anxiety and sorrow and fear and self-loathing, there's arrogance at its core. It presumes you should be successful at 26, when really it takes most writers so much longer to get there. It laments that you'll never be as good as David Foster Wallace, a genius, a master of the craft, while at the same time describing how little you write. You loathe yourself, and yet you're consumed by the grandiose ideas you have about your own importance. You're up too high and down too low. Neither is the place where we get any work done.
Yep.
And I think a lot of people can relate to that regardless of, you know, if they want to be writers or creatives. I feel like it's almost a thing women experience a lot, is that they're these like powerful people who create life, but at the same time they're treated like shit in most capacities. So there's this like Venn diagram, this dichotomy of being a life giver and a creature of growth and a stepping stone to the next thing that someone else wants.
Are you saying like people view women as like a means to an end? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Like, are you saying like a means to an end to like have a baby or like.
Or a family or a wife or a homemaker.
Okay.
Or a daughter or a sister or a friend.
Yeah. What I liked about that quote is like she calls it arrogance, which it really is. Like it really, really is. Because like a lot of people have like the should problem. Like I should be exercising more, or like I should be eating healthily, or like I should be writing a fucking book. But like those in reality like don't exist. And it comes from society, and it is an arrogance that's like an air of like pompousness that's like, okay, well, I should be doing these things because other people be doing these things and like whatever. And it just doesn't exist. It's not the case. I mean, like if you're facing like heart disease, like should you probably eat better? Like yeah, like you probably should. But that's like more of a necessity, not like a like, oh, I should just eat better because I want to be skinny or something like that. You know, let that shit go. Let it go.
Yeah.
Let it go.
Like, who created this should for you?
Exactly.
No one.
Yep.
Get it out of your head.
Yep. Exactly. So this is the part 2 introduction, and it starts with whatever mysterious starlight that guided you this far. And the first question is, are the letters you publish really sent in by anonymous people? Most are so well written that it seems like you or the rumpus writers must be creating them. And Strayed says, the letters published in my column and in this book were sent to me by people who sought my advice. In most cases, the name and or email address of the letter is not visible to me. I do not write the letters, nor does anyone at the rumpus, because I have thousands of letters from which to choose. Well-written letters probably have a higher chance of being plucked from the proverbial pile simply because they're more concise and complex. I agree with you that the letters are lovely. I have even more in my inbox. Do you ever hear from the letter writers after they've read the answers you gave them? I'd be interested in knowing what they have to say. I've heard from about half of them. Each has responded warmly, even when my advice brought up difficult emotions. I imagine it's very intense to have your letter published and answered. I feel honored they trusted me to ponder their lives. You seem so emotionally healthy, but from your column, I can tell you've had your own struggles in the past. Do you ever struggle anymore? Of course.
That's what she says.
Of course, period. Are you a therapist or have you gone through extensive psychotherapy? I am not a therapist, and I've only seen a therapist a handful of times in my life, which means in technical terms, I am totally unqualified for this gig. I fucking love that. All right. So the first story in this section really did speak to me because of the title, which is The Baby Bird. Meagan just laughed at me for it, which we're going to cut out. But it's because I said birds exist to fly and eat bugs. But I mean it in a more like existential way than it sounds.
My argument is that all animals are.
Which is
including humans. So.
Which is true. That's also speaking to my point. Like, we have a purpose that is just to exist.
Right.
Okay. So, but then we have like a baby bird, right? The word baby in itself just speaks to such a level of innocence that as we read on is just so tainted. And I really like how Strayed like connects her anecdote of the baby bird to like her experience. And essentially, Strayed was sexually assaulted by her grandfather when she was very young. And the way that affected her life, like later on, is just so profound. And she connects her suffering with the suffering of a baby bird that she finds. So I'll just read that section. So she says, The memory of it so vivid, and this is her speaking about the assault. The memory of it so vivid, so palpable, so very much a part of me. It came to me during sex and not during sex. It came to me in flashes, and it came to me in dreams. It came to me one day when I found a baby bird fallen from a tree. I'd always heard that you're not supposed to pick up baby birds, that once you touch them, their mama wouldn't come back and get them. But it doesn't matter if that's true or not. This bird was a goner anyway. Its neck was broken, its head lolling treacherously to the side. I cradled it as delicately as I could in my palms, cooing to soothe it. But each time I cooed, it only struggled piteously to get away, terrified by my voice. The bird's suffering would have been unbearable for me to witness at any time, but it was particularly unbearable at that moment in my life because my mother had just died. And because she was dead, I was pretty much dead too. I was dead but alive. And I had a baby bird in my palms that was dead but alive as well. I knew there was only one humane thing to do, though it took me the better part of an hour to work up the courage to do it. I put the baby bird in a paper bag and smothered it with my hands. Nothing that has died in my life has ever died easily, and this bird was no exception. This bird did not go down without a fight. I could feel it through the paper bag, pulsing against my hand and rearing up, simultaneously flaccid and ferocious beneath its translucent sheen of skin, precisely as my grandfather's cock had been. There it was again, right there in the paper bag. The ghost of that old man's cock would always be in my hands. But I understood what I was doing this time. I understood that I had to press against it harder than I could bear. It had to die. Pressing harder was murder. It was mercy. Yeah. Although I have never experienced something like that, like just to put myself in that position makes me so terribly sad because, like, girlhood itself is innocence, right? Like, family are people who are supposed to, like, love and protect you. They are who you have, like, the utmost trust in as a child. And for that just to be betrayed, for that innocence just to be betrayed, to be taken advantage of is just so sickening to me. And, like, for her to live out her trauma through this experience with, like, the baby bird was just so profound to me.
Yeah.
I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, what I liked about it was the question, actually, which says, Dear Sugar, WTF, WTF, WTF. I'm asking this question as it applies to everything every day. Best WTF. And this is her response to it. Of, like, what the fuck did happen to me? Why the fuck did that happen to me?
Like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck?
And it's in the second episode, which is, as far as I've watched in the television show, was this one. And they didn't go in to talk about the sexual assault. But when she reads the question, she goes, what kind of fucking question is this?
Like, someone typed this out, not understanding the response it was going to receive.
Right.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes back into that first part when we read the kind of first page that talks about, you know, what kind of questions do you answer? And she's like, whatever, it doesn't matter. Like, I'll read anything that elicits a response from me.
Yep. And this one did. And, like, I just feel like this felt so cathartic for her.
Yeah, I'm sure. All right, the next one that I wanted to talk about was The Future Has an Ancient Heart, which is essentially an English professor writing to Sugar asking, give my English students and creative writing students a graduation speech. And she starts by saying, there's a line by the Italian writer Carlo Levi or Levi, or whatever.
However you say that.
That I think is apt here. The future has an ancient heart. I love it because it expresses with such grace and economy what is certainly true, that who we become is born of who we most primitively are. That we both know and cannot possibly know what it is we've yet to make manifest in our lives. And I feel like as mid-20-year-olds, I'm now at the late 20-year-olds.
Girl.
But
We need to stop talking like we're so fucking old. Like,
No, I mean, I'm turning 27 next month.
I mean, that's not even that old.
It's not, but it's a late 27-year-old,
Like
or it's a late 20.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of this book was good for me to read at this time in my life.
Yep.
Because your 20s are such a like transformational period. I mean, every decade of your life is a transformational
But
period.
especially your 20s.
And so I'm glad that I've read this, especially questioning going back to school and do I want to keep working in the job that I'm at? And do I want to potentially have a family? And do I want to move across the country? Do I want to move abroad again? You know, all of these questions are kind of coming back up because life makes you think that it's ending a lot quicker than it is.
Absolutely.
And so you're like, if I don't do all of this in my 20s, then I'm never going to be able to do it. So I'm really glad that we read this one particularly. And this kind of goes back to that Taco Bell employee that we were just talking about. She says, you don't have to get a job that makes others feel comfortable about what they perceive as your success. You don't have to explain what you plan to do with your life. You don't have to justify your education by demonstrating its financial rewards. You don't have to maintain an impeccable credit score. Anyone who expects you to do any of those things has no sense of history or economics or science or the arts. You have to pay your own electric bill. You have to be kind. You have to give it all you got. You have to find people who love you truly and love them back with the same truth. But that's all.
Yeah. It's such basic advice, but it's so necessary.
Especially when you are a college graduate facing this whole new world, expecting to have all of these opportunities in front of you. And sometimes you just don't get that.
You don't.
Especially after a pandemic and potentially an economic crisis and all of these other things that are going on.
The world is literally on fire. Like,
I mean, in more than one place right now. So it's hard to get a job even if you do have a degree. Yep. It's hard to get a job at any place doing anything right now because if you get a job at the Taco Bell, you're going to hate it and think that you deserve more because you're a college graduate. But if you get a job somehow at a corporate place, you're going to hate it because it's awful.
Yeah, it's like, it's the way that society is set up.
Yeah.
Right? Capitalism, baby. Like, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
So
I do like this part too. And she acknowledges also that not everyone in this graduating class is young. You know, there could be people even older than her in it, but for the majority of the people, they are all in their early 20s. She says, you are so goddamn young, which means about 8 of the 10 things you have decided about yourself will over time prove to be false. We change so much as humans. We evolve so much, and there's just stop making everything so serious.
Yeah, I mean, it's really not serious. Like, it gets easy to be burdened down by life. It really does. But the whole thing is like, you can't let it because it's not that serious, right? We didn't choose to be here. Okay. We did not sign up to like be put forth on this earth, but like, yeah, here we are. And now, not only that, we have to face the structured world where like we aren't really be set up to succeed. Like, we're not really meant to like surpass like capitalism and the world burning and things like that. And so I know I keep getting existential, but like, you just can't take it too fucking serious.
Just do what you enjoy. Yeah. And be with people you enjoy being around.
And that's it. That's all you can do for yourself at this juncture.
And then the last thing for this one, she says, my disbelief as well as my certainty was the unification of the ancient and the future parts of me. I was everything I intended, and yet still I was surprised by what I got.
Yeah.
And I think that's really cool.
So this is the part 3 introduction, and it says, carry the water to yourself. The first question is, if you had to give one piece of advice to people in their 20s, what would it be? And Strayed says to go to a bookstore and buy 10 books of poetry and read them each 5 times. And they ask why. And she said, because the truth is inside. I love that. It's so poetic. Am I going to do that? No. But in an idealized version of myself, yes, I would do that. Oh. Anything else? To be about 10 times more magnanimous than you believe yourself capable of being. Your life will be 100 times better for it. This is good advice for anyone at any age, but particularly for those in their 20s. Why? Because in your 20s, you're becoming who you're going to be, and so you might as well not be an asshole. That hear this well and hear it good, folks. Let this seep into your soul, okay? I'm going to read it again. Because in your 20s, you're becoming who you're going to be, and so you might as well not be an asshole.
Facts.
Also, because it's harder to be magnanimous when you're in your 20s, I think. And so it's why I like to remind you of it. You're generally less humble in that decade than you'll ever be, and this lack of humility is oddly mixed with insecurity and uncertainty and fear. You will learn a lot about yourself if you stretch out the direction of goodness, of bigness, of kindness, of forgiveness, of emotional bravery. Be a warrior for love. Do you know who you are? Yes. How long did it take you to truly figure out who you are? 30-some years, but I'm still getting used to myself. That's probably one of my favorite quotes in the whole book.
Me too. I really did like that.
Because not only does it give us hope for like what we're trying to figure out currently, but like it also solidifies the fact that like no matter what your age or no matter what stage of life you're in, like you will continue to learn and get to know yourself.
Yeah.
Because you are ever changing.
Yeah.
So validating. So validating.
All right. So the next one that we're going to talk about is called The Truth That Lives There. And it's essentially 3 different women or people. Excuse me. I don't know if they are women or not. I think they are actually. But they all have different situations, but essentially the same situation of I love my partner, but I want to go. I want to leave. And she chooses all of them and responds to all of them with the same response. Essentially, it's probably 5 pages in this book, but essentially you can boil it down to because wanting to leave is enough. If you love and don't want to hurt someone by leaving, you're going to hurt them more by staying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's just facts. Like, we're not saying that shit is easy, right? Mm-mm. Like, if you've been in a relationship to whatever capacity with someone and you're feeling like, okay, it's time for me to, like, get out of here, you're not only doing a disservice to yourself, but you're doing a disservice to the other person by continuing that lie.
Yeah.
And this is kind of in line with, like, people pleasing. Mm-hmm. Like, it's a form of manipulation.
Yeah.
Like, you're trying to control the outcome of the situation. And because you're trying to control it in a way that's, like, what you think, but is not accurate, is to be better for the other person, you're therefore, like, manipulating them. You're not being honest with them. And it's not cool. It's just better for everyone involved just to be real and honest about how they feel and when they feel it.
Yeah, I think one of the main takeaways from this book that I got was the only person you can control is yourself.
Yep.
You can't force someone else to love you. No. You can't force someone else to stay.
No. I mean, like, I don't want to say that, like, we start this existence, like, with just us, but, like, it is. Like, yeah. Of course, there's the mother that birthed us. There's the people that, like, take care of you. But, like, and like we talked about in Tomorrow a lot, is, like, it comes down to choices. It comes down to your choices. Like, you have the ability to control this, and this being, like, your atmosphere. Your atmosphere does not affect, like, other people's atmosphere, nor can you control their atmosphere. So why even try?
Right.
So one that I wanted to touch on in this section was the On Your Island story. And essentially a transgender person comes forward and like talks about their experience and like how hard it is like wanting to be like themselves versus like how they present to the other world or the outer world rather, and like the love of like parents, right? And what breaks my heart is that they signed their letter orphan, which is just so sad.
Well, they want their son.
Yeah.
It took them too long.
Yeah.
And they have grieved their daughter, and now they want their son.
Yeah.
And this person is now questioning if it is worth going back.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's scary. They say that it feels scary, and it is scary. And I love what Sugar decides to say. She says, please forgive your parents, not for them, for you. Mm-hmm. Right? Which is such a bigger lesson in forgiveness.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the times it's not about forgiving the other person. It's releasing yourself from that.
The anger.
Yeah. Or the sadness or the grief, whatever that emotion may be. And it's so beautiful because she says, a new era in which they are finally capable of loving the real you. Let them. Love them back. See how that feels. So she's not denying the fact that what they did initially was terrible, but she is allowing there to be room for a new relationship to be formed, like a second chance.
Yeah.
And I think that's beautiful.
It is. And I hope they took that advice and forgave them.
I do too.
Themselves.
So this is the part 4 intro, and it starts with, you don't have to be broken for me. And the first question was, if love were an animal, what species would it be, and could you train it? It would be a baby bird. No, just
it eats bugs and flies around.
It flies. So the answer is, love would be 2 animals. A humming. Oh, it was a bird. It is a bird.
I actually also, like, I feel like I missed something in this section.
I did, yeah, because a lot of this I'm reading and I'm like, where was that? But anyway.
Well, no, just like this, a hummingbird and a snake. She doesn't go on to explain it or anything. And I just feel like I have no idea I feel like there's an inside joke I'm missing or something.
Okay, so let me read it. So it says, love would be 2 animals, a hummingbird and a snake. Both are perfectly untrainable. Let's dive into what we think that means.
I think we should be joint professors.
All right, class. So for today's lesson, we have a hummingbird and a snake. Both are perfectly untrainable.
Tell us.
How many snakes does it take
to train a hummingbird?
How many hummingbirds are in the basket? Okay.
Whoever guesses the closest wins the jar of hummingbirds.
This is your final exam. You pass or you fail.
Okay, actually, funny story.
Oh, God.
There was a final exam at my university, and I was turning in the exam, and on the back there was a bonus question, and it literally said, what does the fox say?
For those listening on audio, I just rolled my eyes so fucking hard. That wore me out. Did you pass?
I mean, I didn't fail.
You graduated.
Yeah, so
I guess you knew what the fucking fox
said.
All right.
Maybe I made that story up.
No, ma'am. Okay. So a hummingbird and a snake. Okay.
No, just go to the next one.
I want to talk about
Oh my God, okay.
What do you think that is? Like, a hummingbird and a snake. Both are perfectly untrainable. So, like,
vicious and fast.
I think it's talking about, like, pursuit. Like, the hummingbird is prey and, like, snake is, like, the predator. All right, let's just keep going. Okay. What's a weird thing that happened to you? The quote right
And facts. Alex talking about birds.
That is the tiny beautiful thing. It's a baby.
Baby birds.
Oh, this is how I cope with trauma. Okay. One time I was hiking up a mountain in New Mexico. It was March, the trail still covered with snow in places. There was no one around me for hours until I came upon two people, a man and a woman, who had just come upon each other. We were three strangers who met on a mountain in New Mexico. We got to talking, and somehow within the first 5 minutes of knowing each other, we figured out that we all had the same birthday. And not only that, we were born in 3 consecutive years. As we were talking, 3 feathers blew up to us on the snow. We picked them up. How did that happen? Is that real? Okay.
She says it does. The thing to me that's really interesting about that is that she doesn't believe in God.
Yeah, but
like that
how
happened.
do you explain that? What is it called? There's like some mystical power. I don't know.
Sedona, Arizona.
I don't know. The chakras. I don't know. Okay. I don't know.
I bet it was a vortex.
Oh, maybe. Okay. I don't know what that is. What do Okay. That one was very woo-woo. What do you do when you don't know what to do about something? She said, I talk to Mr. Sugar and my friends. I make lists. I attempt to analyze the situation from the perspective of my best self. The one that's generous, reasonable, forgiving, loving, big-hearted, and grateful. I think really hard about what I'll wish I did a year from now. I map out the consequences of various actions I could take. I ask what my motivations are, what my desires are, what my fears are, and what I have to lose and what I have to gain. I move toward the light, even if it's a hard direction in which to move. I trust myself. I keep the faith. I mess up sometimes. That is such good advice. Half the time, I'm not even thinking about none of that shit. Like, I'm like, okay.
What makes me feel good?
Yeah, like, I'm like, comfort first, always. Go. But, like, not always, obviously, but, like, a majority of the time.
I know, I highlighted about half of that.
But it's so good, like, to think about it in that way, like, okay, like, from a year now, like, is this decision going to push me in that direction or not? Hey. Okay. What are your spiritual beliefs? I do not believe in God as most people conceive of God, but I believe there is a divine spirit in each of us. I believe there is something bigger than our individual selves that we can touch when we live our lives with integrity, compassion, and love. I agree with that, for sure.
I do too.
What would you like to tell us about sex? Snakes and hummingbirds, perhaps a polar bear. Homegirl, explain yourself. Like,
That's what I'm saying. I feel like this is an inside joke that I missed
out on. I truly think she was talking about, like, the prey and the predator. Because, like, I know she's not describing women as, like, snakes or polar bears.
Do snakes eat hummingbirds?
No, but, like, maybe that was just the first predatory animal she could think of.
I feel like she's a little bit more poetic than that.
Maybe. I'll give her the benefit of the doubt.
We don't have to know.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. So I have... So our first story for this section, is the ghost ship that didn't carry us. And essentially, the query they are asking is, do I want to be a parent? We are nearing our 40th year of life, and my wife will no longer be able to provide me children soon. And neither of us have an opinion on it, and we expected to just kind of know. And I feel like that's how I am about children. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I'm expecting to just kind of have a feeling of like, all right, now I'm going to want it. But essentially, Sugar says that she too thought that she would just know, and she too didn't just know until she held her baby. But she doesn't persuade them to have a baby or to not have a baby. She kind of lays out ways to think about whenever we're in this kind of like intersection of life, how do we make that decision? So she says, every life, a poet writes, has a sister ship, one that follows quite another route than the one we ended up taking. We want it to be otherwise, but it cannot be. The people we might have been live a different phantom life than the people we are. And so the question is, who do you intend to be? And she says, imagine yourself, as this poet describes, called Thomas Transtromer, in a forest, staring at your house, watching all of the lives that could have been yours. And she says, put yourself in that position. I think if you did, you'd see what I see, that there will likely be no clarity, at least at the outset. There will only be the choice you make and the sure knowledge that either one will contain some loss. And I think that's something that I'm currently grappling with. And, you know, I've been talking about potentially going to law school. I've been talking about all of these other like routes, changing my career, becoming a teacher, all of these things that I've thought that I've wanted to do throughout my life. And I am sad to realize that I won't be able to do all of them.
Yeah.
And I think I'm learning that it's okay.
Yeah.
And like you're allowed to grieve the routes that you didn't take.
Have you ever read The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath?
I have not.
Okay. So there's an expert in there where she talks about a fig tree, and she talks about exactly this. So she says, and this is from The Bell Jar, she says, I saw my life branching out before me like the green fig tree in the story. From the tip of every branch, like a fat purple fig, a wonderful future beckoned and winked. One fig was a husband and a happy home and children, and another fig was a famous poet, and another fig was a brilliant professor, and another fig was E.G., the amazing editor, and another fig was Europe and Africa and South America, and another fig was Constantine and Socrates and Attila, and a pack of other lovers with queer names and offbeat professions, and another fig was an Olympic lady crew champion, and beyond and above these figs were many more figs I couldn't quite make out. I saw myself sitting in the crotch of this fig tree, starving to death, just because I couldn't make up my mind about which figs I would choose. I wanted each and every one of them, but choosing one meant losing all the rest, and as I sat there unable to decide, the figs began to wrinkle and go black, and one by one they plopped to the ground at my feet.
Oh.
Yeah, damn,
I
right?
knew it was going there.
Oh, Sylvia.
And I think that's the thing about life is that if you don't make a decision, that is the decision.
Yeah. As I was growing up, and especially like when I entered college, like I started to really think about like, well, what if I had done this in high school? Or what if I had done this? Or like, what if I met that person then? Or like, what, like, blah, 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 blah. It's such a waste of time. Don't do it.
I know.
Don't do it because you're physically wasting your time. Like time is moving on regardless of those choices.
And emotional.
But emotional capacity. Like you don't need to sit here and be like regretting the choices that you already made. The choice was made. Period. End of story. We can't go back. There is no past to go back to. There is only going forward. And so, like, if I was Sugar in this moment, like, I would literally just tell myself and to tell everyone, like, just make the next best decision. Mm-hmm. And then those decisions will add up to, like, a bigger choice, a bigger path, you know?
And Sugar goes on to say, thinking deeply about your choices and actions from the stance of your future self can serve as both a motivational and a corrective force. It can help you stay true to who you really are, as well as inspire you to leverage your desires against your fears. Because the writer of the question says, we don't want to do this just because we're afraid we're going to regret it if we don't. And she says that's almost the only way you know to do something.
Yeah.
Is if you think you'll regret not doing it later.
Yep. I just don't think people should spend so much time with regret. Like, I definitely do it, and it's just, it doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help anything. Just accept.
Yeah.
Accept.
And I will wrap up this story with, we'll only know that whatever that sister life was, it was important and beautiful and not ours. It was the ghost ship that didn't carry us. There's nothing to do but salute it from the shore.
Yep.
And I have chills.
Chills. chills, full body chills.
Our last story from section 4 is The Obliterated Place. And this is the third and final time I cried during this novel, i.e. my pink tab. But a person's son dies in a drunk driving accident at 22. And this father does not know how to go on. And he is so devastated by this that he can't even write in normal paragraphs. He writes in these numbered lists. And beautifully, it ends on number 22. And Cheryl responds in the same kind of numbered list format.
So I'll start with number 14. She says, the word obliterate comes from the Latin obliterare. Ob means against, literaire meaning letter or script. A literal translation is being against the letters. It was impossible for you to write me letters, so you made me list instead. It is impossible for you to go on as you were before, so you must go on as you never have.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Yeah, she even starts it with saying, I don't know how you go on without your son. I only know that you do, and you have, and you will.
You will. Grief is so hard. And I know that's such a basic fucking sentence to say, but like, those who've experienced grief, like, and that's a big theme in this book, is grief, right? And grief comes in many forms. It's not just death of a loved one. It comes in the loss of missing out your favorite movie, or the loss of a friend that has moved a distance away. Like, it comes in many different forms.
Or shutting out toxic family members.
Yeah, facts. There's just many forms that grief comes in. And grief teaches us a lot, as Strayed says, but no matter what form it comes in, like, you are a changed person because of it. And in number 18, Strayed says, your son hasn't yet taught you everything he has to teach you. He taught you how to love like you've never loved before. He taught you how to suffer like you've never suffered before. Perhaps the next thing is to teach you is acceptance, and the thing after that, forgiveness. And then number 19 says, forgiveness bellows from the bottom of the canoe. There are doubts, dangers, unfathomable travesties. There are stories you'll learn if you're strong enough to travel there. One of them might cure you.
I read a couple of these out loud to Shelby, and this is actually one of them. And no, I didn't know what they were. I just like was reading them. And then we get to 23, and it says, there is no 23. That like wrecked me, because the son is 22 and he will never be 23. And I had to like put down the book for like a minute and cry.
Yeah.
And she says, you go on, 24, you go on by doing the best you can.
I just think about how validating this must have been for the father. I mean, for Strayed to like have the forethought to put that as number 23, and then like just it's amazing, and it's terrible, and it's heartbreaking. She goes on to say in number 26 that the entire premise of your healing demands that you do let go of expectation. You must come to understand and accept that your son will always be the only man he actually was, the 22-year-old who made it as far as that red light. Oh my God. Stop. Like, I mean, don't stop. Keep going, because it's beautiful and terrible, but God. And number 27 says, to be anything else dishonors him.
Yeah.
And it just... it's so hard. It's so hard. She says in number 28 is, the strange and painful truth is that I'm a better person because I lost my mom young. When you say you experience my writing as sacred, that you are touching, or that what you are touching is the divine place within me that is my mother. Sugar is the temple I built in my obliterated place. I'd give it all back in a snap, but the fact is that grief taught me things. It showed me shades and hues I couldn't have otherwise seen. It required me to suffer. It compelled me to reach. Which is a connection from an earlier story that she wrote to Stuck.
Uh-huh.
She said you have to reach. That's the fact of the matter of this whole thing. Like, life is not just black and white, it is hues, and it is not always good and bad. And the greatest lesson that I'm currently learning and still trying to learn is that, like, without the bad, like, you can't appreciate the good.
Absolutely.
Like, you have to go through those things, because not only does it teach you something, but it helps you appreciate the good when it does come.
You wouldn't know things are good if you didn't have the bad things.
Exactly. And I just, to anyone that's lost something, like, there's not something that someone can say to, like, relieve yourself of that pain and that loss, but I think Strayed did a really good job of what she wrote here.
Yeah, I agree.
And I suggest that anyone who has dealt with grief on that level, like, read that section.
Yeah.
For sure. All right, so part 5 starts out with put it in a box and wait. The first question is, you give a lot of advice about what to do. Do you have any advice about what not to do? She says, don't do what you know on a gut level to be the wrong thing to do. Don't stay when you know you should go, or go when you know you should stay. Don't fight when you should hold steady, or hold steady when you should fight. Don't focus on the short-term fun instead of the long-term fallout. Don't surrender all your joy for an idea you used to have about yourself that isn't true anymore. Don't seek joy at all cost. I know it's hard to know what to do when you have a conflicting set of emotions and desires, but it's not as hard as we pretend it is. Saying it's hard is ultimately a justification to do whatever seems like the easiest thing to do. Have the affair, stay at that horrible job, end a friendship over a slight, keep loving someone who treats you terribly. I don't think there's a single dumbass thing I've done in my adult life that I didn't know was a dumbass thing to do while I was doing it, even when I justified it to myself, as I did every damn time. The truest part of me knew I was doing the wrong thing, always. As the years passed, I'm learning how to better trust my gut and not do the wrong thing, but every so often I get a harsh reminder that I've still got work to do. Damn. Do you think the advice you write in your column is always right? I stand by the advice I've given. I don't take anything back, but I wouldn't claim that what I have to say to any given person is, quote, right. Mostly because I don't think the advice I give is necessarily on the right-wrong continuum. I sometimes state that I firmly believe a person should do one thing or another, but more often I try to help those who write to me see a third way. I'm not so much telling people what to do in my columns as I'm attempting to either present a perspective that might be difficult for those who write to me to see on their own, or to more complexly hash out the either-or options that the letter writer has posed. I think the answer to most problems is more often than not outside of the right-wrong binary that we tend to cling to when we're angry or scared or in pain. We are complicated people. Our lives do not play out in absolutes. I want my column to reflect that, but it's always only my opinion. There are others too. Yeah.
I am going to quickly move to a bit of Sully in your suite. And the main thing that I just want to say here is the quandary that we are asked to solve as Sugar is, should I let my sister and her husband, who I view as the perfect couple, walk me down the aisle now that I've learned that they've both cheated on each other before, but are still very happily together? And essentially, there's a lot more to it, and Sugar talks a lot more about it. But the one thing that I did want to mention is a perfect couple is a wholly private thing. No one but the two people in the perfect relationship know for certain whether they're in one. Its only defining quality is that it's composed of two people who feel perfectly right about sharing their lives with each other, even during the hard times. And I really thought that was beautiful, especially being a newlywed.
Yeah, that is beautiful.
And of course, the final one of the 2012 edition is Tiny Beautiful Things, which is the beginning episode of Tiny Beautiful Things. So I had heard snippets of this before actually reading it, but essentially someone says, what would you tell your 20-something self if you could talk to her now? And you heard our from the very beginning of the podcast, our quote was from this chapter. But there's a lot of other things too that are very beautiful. And her very first thing is stop worrying about whether you're fat. You're not fat. Or rather, you're sometimes a little bit fat, but who gives a shit?
Period. I mean, yeah, like she knows. This girl is so wise. Like,
Yeah.
as women, that's like one of the main things. And we've talked about it on the podcast, but like that's one of the main things that we all struggle with is like our self-worth and our self-identity and how we are perceived by others. And, you know, Straight is just saying here, like, none of that fucking matters. Just live your fucking life. Like, I love when she says, your assumptions about the lives of others are in direct relation to your naive pomposity.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, girl. Queen shit. Like, in the age of like social media, like it's so easy to compare ourselves. It's so easy to like sit here and be like, oh, well, this person's got it all together. Like they must just be so okay. Like the fact of the matter is, we've heard it time and time again. Like what you see on social media is like the edited, the best version of that person. You know, it does not show the behind the scenes. It does not show the reality of their lives. And it really does create this like psychological effect where we think that that is something that we should be attaining or achieving. Going back to the shoulds, right? The false shoulds. Like, I should be that. I should look like that. I should be doing this type of thing. And at the end of the day, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Because it's not real. And therefore, you shouldn't be spending so much time worrying about it.
I really like this paragraph that says, when you meet a man in the doorway of a Mexican restaurant who later kisses you while explaining that this kiss doesn't mean anything because much as he likes you, he's not interested in having a relationship with you or anyone right now. Just laugh and kiss him back. Your daughter will have his sense of humor. Your son will have his eyes.
It's so magical. And it's so true. Like, I relate to that one a lot because, like, as a single young woman, like, I've had those experiences. And it's so true. Like, you can only meet someone where they're at.
Yeah.
You know, you don't know what they're thinking. You don't know what capacity they have for XYZ. Like, just enjoy the moment.
Yeah.
Just have fun. It's okay. So this is part 6. It starts out with, we are the solid, in parentheses, new columns. And the first question is, what happened after you stopped writing the Dear Sugar column on the Rumpus? I kept being Sugar. I wrote individual columns for literary magazines and anthologies. I co-hosted an advice podcast called Dear Sugars with Steve Allman and another one solo called Sugar Calling. And eventually I went back to writing the column regularly. This time as a monthly newsletter I publish on Substack. The letters in this section are drawn from that newsletter. Do you ever feel burdened by so many years of contemplating other people's pains, problems, and struggles? Many years ago, I became certified as an emergency medical technician. During my training, my classmates and I would sometimes be required to enact scenes in which multiple people had been injured. We were each assigned parts to play, sometimes one of the injured victims, sometimes one of the EMTs who was helping the injured victims, sometimes one of the bystanders who wasn't doing much of anything. Pretty quickly, I realized the worst role of all was to be one of the bystanders. In that role, it was almost impossible not to freak out. I learned then what I've learned in many other ways over the course of my life, that when we're in the presence of someone else's pain, the burden of not doing is so much greater than the burden of doing. Doing lifts the burden, even if it's a small thing, like writing a letter. Oh, it's so good.
It is. She's a very good writer.
It's so good.
So the first one that I chose was Trust Yourself Wildly. I really liked this one. It's about this 25-year-old who feels like she just feels like she floats. She watches TV. She hangs out with friends. She's not doing anything.
I relate.
And there's 3 kind of to-do items that Sugar gives this 25-year-old. She says, 1, trust yourself wildly. 2, forgive yourself. And 3, test yourself. And another thing that she mentions is writing down on and I'm actually going to do this, is take out a notebook at the top of a blank page, write the word curiosity. On the next page, write creativity. On the next, fears, and so on, page by page, through ambitions, power, desires, dreams, and other words you might wish to add. And then go back and fill each of those pages with lists of your own. Write down all the things that you're curious about, all the things you want to create, that you fear, that feel like your power, and keep writing until you filled up all of your blank pages with everything inside of you.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I think I want to do that. You should do that. Y'all should do that.
And then lastly is the heartbreak hellscape.
Hey.
So this one goes back to the one that we talked about in section 3, I believe, called The Truth That Lives There. And essentially, this guy is writing in to say, my girlfriend broke up with me because of you, because of your column, and because of specifically the one called The Truth That Lives There. And I mean, it's a valid thing, and he doesn't put too much blame on her. He just says, you know, what the fuck?
Yeah.
And I think it's a valid thing for him to question.
Yeah, like wanting to leave is enough. Yep.
Yeah. And especially when he thinks they're soulmates, what's so devastating is that he never thought about leaving, and she did.
Yeah, I mean, when he says, like, what do you think, sugar? What if your column overly influenced her and is now preventing us from working through our issues together? What if the idea of wanting to go is enough? Blinded her to the good things, even she admits we have. The thing is, no outside source is going to, quote, blind you from what you already think, what you already know deep inside, right? Like, it may reaffirm something, it may change your mind, but if she was already feeling this type of way, like, no column was gonna, like, enhance or disenhance that.
Well, I think I disagree. I think it gave her the clarity that she needed.
Well, I think it did. I'm saying, like, but she was already having these feelings.
Yeah.
Like, before she read the column, it was in her mind.
Right. And she said that to him, too.
Yeah.
But that doesn't... I think what he's asking, though, is still valid.
Oh, yeah. I'm not saying it's not valid. Yeah. I'm just saying, like, the part specifically where he says, like, is it because your column blinded her? I don't think that's valid. No, because she was already struggling with this concept.
Right. But she wasn't being open with him about it, though. I think that's the issue that he's struggling with, is that he's like, well, I didn't hear any of this until your column came out. Right. And while, like, this is not anything that I ever thought would happen, so what is this?
Right. So she says, only you can put your shattered heart back together. Only you can find a way to move forward without your girlfriend. Only you can open up your heart to love again, even if it terrifies you. What I can do, what I try to do in every one of my columns, is to write words that will help everyone who reads them to see their situations more clearly by illuminating the darkest corners within us, where the scary things we already know hide out. That's what happened when your ex-girlfriend read that column of mine, Afraid. In the story I told about deciding to leave a man I love, she recognized herself. She wasn't following my instructions when she broke up with you. She was admitting to you what she knew long ago. Yeah, that's what I was trying to say about like the blinding thing. She wasn't parroting my words. She was telling you the truth. The most mind-expanding, soul-shifting, heart-healing thing you can do is believe her. Yup. And not only believe her, but receive that truth as the gift that it is. Not for her, for you. Yes. That's the whole thing. Like, when someone comes to you with that, believe them. Fucking believe them. Accept it. Move on. In that way that she was being honest with him, like we talked about earlier, like, she's being real with how she feels. She is not trying to manipulate the situation because she thinks it's easier for him or better for him if she continues this fakeness that she's, like, playing out.
I would say that it wasn't necessarily fakeness. She loved him and wanted to be with him, but she also wanted something else. Right.
Yes. Continuing that would be the fakeness.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. And it's messy.
And there's an argument to be said too about, it's kind of like the ghosts, the ghost ships is like, you can stay too and be perfectly happy if you love each other and are open with that.
Yeah.
You know, but there's also an opportunity for a different life elsewhere too, for everyone.
For everyone. There's another fig to plug.
Don't make me cry.
Megan's like, I wish you had never told me that.
I will be reading that soon.
Hell yeah. It was depressing, so
I do have a goal to read 5 classics this year, and I haven't read any of them. So
maybe we need to add one to our list. Megan, give us your final thoughts.
It was a great read that I never hope to read again, and will enjoy the show very much.
All right.
What about you?
That's Megan being real, everybody. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I will return to it because I want to let things sit. And I think because of the podcast, like I quickly read it and I want to go back and like take my time with it all. I give this book a 5 out of 5. I will recommend this book to everybody. I get weird with books like this though. Like when I read Bell Hooks for the first time, I like bought like 5 people that book for Christmas.
This is a great gift book.
It is a great gift book. I'm not going to do that again because it did not go over well, but I do suggest many people read it.
Yeah, I think I would revisit it if I experience grief.
Yeah.
Or like many years down the road.
Yeah.
Right now, I don't want to reread it.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot to...
Yeah, I give it a 4 out of 5. It was a great read, a beneficial read. It's just not the type of thing that I enjoy reading that much.
Yeah, like right now, just with everything, I feel like feel-good books is what we need.
Yeah.
What we're at. Well, I think this book was a necessity, but in the same with other feel-good books. Like, you can't just be reading this all the time.
No. Well, and I think it's a great and necessary read, but it's just not something that I read. Like normally. I don't typically read. The only type of nonfiction books I read are memoirs typically. So this is just like out of my comfort zone.
Gotcha. This is not out of my comfort zone. In fact, I relish in this shit. But that's also because I go to therapy. So I get recommended a lot of these kind of books.
Yeah.
But yeah, 5 out of 5 for me. Yay. Yay, Cheryl Strayed.
Oh, and to bring my Taylor Swift, how do I want to say this? Taylor Swift corner. This book reminded me of Dear Reader by Taylor Swift on Midnights. 3 a.m. edition. Which I think is just my new thing. Anyway, next week's book will be None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell.
Yay! I know a lot of you bitches are looking forward to this, so listen.
I'm very excited to read it. I've heard mostly great things about it. Now that it's been like a big hype, I've seen a couple things on TikTok that are like, it's overhyped, but I'm still very excited.
There's always one of those. And I mean, I've definitely been one of those people before, but I am very excited for this read.
Yep.
Yay.
So you can email us at goatpod@gmail.com with suggestions, book recommendations, constructive criticism.
You know the drill.
Check our social media on Facebook. It's all the good ones are taken. You can also find us on Instagram and TikTok at @goatpod. You can find my bookstagram at peas_reads. Thanks for listening.
This has been
All the Good Ones
Are Taken.